work in law enforcement. My partner and I just led an official police report because nobody would believe what we shot at tonight. I work the graveyard patrol in a jurisdiction where the trees outnumber the people 10,000 to 1. It is a vast, deeply isolated county dominated by dense pine forest, winding dirt logging routes, and sprawling properties owned by people who value extreme privacy. You get used to the quiet. You learn to appreciate the long hours of driving through pitch black roads with nothing but the hum of the engine and the dashboard lights to keep you company. But the extreme isolation also means that when something goes wrong out here, help is a very long way away. My partner and I were parked near a deserted county intersection, drinking lukewarm coffee from a thermo flask, when the radio mount on the dashboard crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice broke through the static. She was a veteran operator, someone who usually handled horrific car accidents and domestic disputes with a flat, unwavering calm. Tonight, her voice was entirely different. Her tone was elevated, tight with genuine stress. Unit 4, I need you to respond to a 1054 at the estate at the end of the Upper Ridge Road, the dispatcher said. I have an open line with the homeowner. He is frantic. I cannot get a clear read on the situation. My partner grabbed the radio microphone. Dispatch, can you confirm the nature of the intruder? Is the caller providing a description? Negative. The dispatcher replied, a faint tremor echoing over the frequency. The caller is not speaking to me anymore. I'm just hearing background noise. It sounds like heavy hooves, like livestock stomping on a hardwood floor, and a man screaming. The transmission cut off, leaving a heavy, oppressive silence in the cab of our cruiser. My partner and I exchanged a single hard look. He dropped the vehicle into drive, flipped on the emerging lights without hitting the sirens, and floored the accelerator. The drive took nearly 20 minutes. The paved highway eventually gave way to a deeply rutted, unpaved gravel road that went steeply up into the heavily forested hills. The tree's canopy grew incredibly dense. The interlocking branches blocked out the moonlight, created a suffocating tunnel of darkness around the speeding cruiser. We finally breached the tree line and pulled into a massive circular driveway. The property was a sprawling, multi-story log cabin built from incredible thick, dark timber. It belonged to a notoriously wealthy big-game hunter, a man who spent his fortune traveling the globe to harvest exotic trophies. The house sat in total darkness. Not a single exterior light was burning. We stepped out of the cruiser, drawing our heavy flashlights and our service weapons. The night air, freezing. We approached the front porch, keeping our boots light on the wooden planks. We did not need a knock. The massive heavy oak front door had been completely obliterated. The thick wooden panels were fractured and splintered, but the damage had not been inflicted by someone trying to break in. The jagged shards of wood were pushed outward, pointing towards the porch. Someone or something had violently smashed their way out of the house. Someone wanted out in a massive hurry, my partner whispered, holding his weapon tightly against his chest as he swept his flashlight over the broken threshold. Or something pushed them out, I replied, keeping my voice incredibly low. We stepped carefully over the splintered wood and entered the cabin. The interior was a cavernous, vaulted space completely dedicated to death. The walls were lined top to bottom with an absolute absurd of taxidermy mounts. Massive grizzly bears stood in the corners, permanently frozen in aggressive rolling postures. Timber wolves stalked across the upper lofts, and dozens of heavily antlered deer heads protruded from the dark timber walls. Our flashlight's beams swept across the room, catching the reflection of hundreds of polished glass eyes staring blankly back at us from the dark. The air inside was thick and stale, smelling heavy of formaldehyde and of fresh pooling blood. Clear the ground floor, my partner ordered, moving slowly toward the kitchen archway. Keep your angles tight. Whatever did this could still be in here. I moved toward the massive stone fireplace dominating the center of the living room. The heavy leather furniture had been tossed aside, and the heavy coffee table overturned and splintered. I found the homeowner resting against the base of the stone hearth. He was dead. The scene was incredibly brutal. His chest and abdomen had been violently gored, punctured by multiple deep, jagged wounds that were entirely too wide and ragged to be been caused by a knife or a spear. The fabric of his flannel shirt was shredded, soaked through with dark blood that pooled heavily onto the rugs beneath him. His eyes were wide open, locked in an expansion of terror. I have a victim, I called out softly. He is gone. Massive puncture trauma. My partner emerged from the kitchen, stepping carefully around the overturned furniture to reach my side. He aimed his light down at the body, his jaw setting to a hard, rigid line. If this was a bear or a feral animal that got inside, we would see muddy tracks, my partner said, sweeping his flashlight across the pristine hardwood floors surrounding the blood pool. There is no mud. There are no paw prints leading to the door. I lowered my beam to the floor, tracking the space immediately surrounding the victim. My partner was right. There were no tracks. However, there was a distinct, highly unusual trail leading away from the body toward the dark hallway branching off the living room. It was a trail of dark yellowed synthetic stuffing, small clumps of brittle animal hair, and thin, rusted pieces of shaping wire. I followed the trail of debris with my flashlight, letting the beam travel slowly up the adjacent timber wall. The wall was decorated with a series of framed Polaroid photographs that featured the homeowner standing proudly in this exact living room, holding a hunting rifle, posing beneath his various trophies. I looked closely at the photograph, posted directly at eye level. It showed the man smiling widely, standing beneath a true massive record-breaking elk head, mounted on a heavy wooden plaque above the stone fireplace. I immediately raised my flashlight, aiming the concentrated beam directly at the space above the stone hearth. The heavy wooden plaque was securely bolted to the timber, but the plaque was entirely empty. The iron bolts that normally secured the mount had been violently ripped outward. The massive elk head was missing. The elk is gone, I said, a cold knot forming rapidly in my stomach. What are you talking about? My partner asked, keeping his weapon aimed down the dark hallway. Look at the photo on the wall. I insisted, pointing my beam at the photograph and then back up to the empty wooden plaque. Look at the mount, it was ripped off the wall. Before my partner could process the missing trophy, a sound echoed through the deep darkness of the hallway. It was a heavy thud. It sounded exactly like hard, solid hooves striking the wooden floorboards, moving with a heavy, unnatural dragging gait. We immediately raised our weapons, aligning our flashlight beams perfectly down the narrow corridor. Police department, show yourself right now, my partner yelled, his voice booming aggressively through the silent, cavernous house. The clopping sound stopped. A shape stepped slowly out of an adjacent side room, entirely blocking the hallway. My brain completely rejected the visual information, entering my optic nerves. It was a patchwork, horrifying abomination of stitched flesh and wire. The massive, decapitated head of the missing elk was roughly, violently set into the thick, hulking torso of a grizzly bear. The creature stood upright on a set of mismatched, decaying animal legs that buckled and twitched under the uneven weight. Thick, corroded black sutures crisscrossed that matted fur, bursting open in several places to reveal dry, yellow stuffing and rusted metal armature wire protruding from the seams. The elk head scraped against the ceiling, the massive antlers gouging deep grooves into the drywall. The creature's neck snapped at an impossible angle, and its dead glass eyes caught the glare of our flashlights. Drop your... My partner screamed, completely unable to finish the standard command, as his mind failed to comprehend the monstrosity standing before us. The creature lunged forward. It moved with a terrifying, jerky speed, its mismatched hooves tearing into the floorboards as it lowered the massive antlers directly towards our chest. My partner fired his weapon rapidly, the deafening cracks of the caliber handgun echoing violently in the enclosed space. I watched the bullet strike the center of the creature's stitched chest. The impacts produced small explosive puffs of dry dust and stuffing. The creature did not flinch. It did not even slow down. The bullet simply passed harmlessly through the dry hide in the wire frame. Move! I yelled, grabbing my partner by the shoulder and dragging him backwards. We scrambled away from the hallway, diving frantically into the heavy set of double doors located just off the main living room area. We slammed the thick oak doors shut behind us, the heavy brass latch engaging with a sharp click. Brace it, my partner shouted. We threw our combined body weight against a massive solid wood bookshelf sitting against the wall, dragging it aggressively across the carpet until it completely blocked the double doors. A second later, a devastating force slammed to the other side of the wood. The oak doors groaned violently, the hinges straining in protest under the immense weight of the creature attempting to batter its way inside, the sharp points of the antlers piercing entirely through the upper panels of the wood, splintering the oak and retreating for another strike. We backed away from the barricade, sweeping our lights across the enclosed space. We were trapped in the homeowner's private study. The room was cluttered and chaotic. Empty glass liquor bottles were scattered heavily across the expensive rugs, and dozens of half-burned candles sat in pools of melted wax on the surfaces. Sitting directly in the center of a heavy desk was an open, letter-bound journal. I rushed to the desk, illuminated the page with my flashlight. "Keep your weapon on the door," I told my partner, leaning over the messy, frantic handwriting scrawled across the paper. The entries were unhinged, heavily detailing a deep, unraveling paranoia. I read the scattered paragraphs rapidly as the heavy, rhythmic battering continued across the barricaded door. "The woods are deeply angry. I took far too much from the tree line. I hunted for sport, and now the forest is hunting me. The spirit is ancient. It lives in the timber. It watches me from the edge of the property line every single night. I can feel the vapor of its pressing against the windows." I flipped the page, my hands trembling as the heavy oak door splintered further under another violent attack. "I brought a medium out here. He told me the spirit is vaporous. It cannot be shattered or trapped in its natural state. He told me it requires a physical tether, a vessel to anchor the vapor to the physical plane. If I construct a vessel worthy of the forest, the spirit will inhabit it out of pure vanity. I spent 3 days stitching the pieces together in the workshop. A body for the forest. If I can lure the ghost inside the effigy, it will be trapped within the physical materials. Then I can burn the wood and the hide. I can kill the ghost by burning the vessel." I looked up from the journal, the terrifying reality of the situation rapidly assimilating itself in my mind. "Bullets will never stop that thing," I yelled over the deafening sound of the antlers shredding the upper door panels. "It is just dry hides, glass, and wire. The journal says it's a spiritual tether. We have to destroy the vessel." "Then what the hell do we do?" my partner demanded, his weapon trembling slightly as he aimed at the fractured wood. I looked down at the floor, sweeping my beam over the scattered debris. The homeowner had been drinking heavily, relying on cheap alcohol to manage his profound terror. Several empty bodies lay on the rug, but near the leg of the desk I spotted a large glass bottle of bourbon that was still a quarter full of amber liquor. I snatched the bottle off the floor. I grabbed a heavy cloth curtain hanging over near the window and drew my tactical folding knife, and violently sliced a long, thick strip of the fabric free. I shoved one end of the cloth deep into the narrow neck of the glass bottle, ensuring it soaked heavily into the high-proof alcohol, leaving the dry end hanging out like a crude wick. "Get your lighter ready," I told him, stepping directly in front of the barricaded doors, gripping the neck of the glass bottle tightly in my right hand. "When the door gives away, you light the fabric. Do not hesitate." My partner holstered his firearm, his hand shaking as he pulled out a metal Zippo lighter from his vest. He flipped the lid, the small bright flame illuminating his pale face. The heavy doors could not sustain another impact. The center panels shattered inward, sending shards of splintered wood flying across the study. The creature rammed its massive shoulder against the gate, violently shoving the bookshelf aside with a terrifying strength. The abomination stepped into the room, his mismatched hooves crackling against the floorboards. The dead glass eyes of the elk reflected the small flame of the lighter. It lowered its massive antlers, preparing to charge directly into our chest. "Light it!" I screamed. My partner thrusted the lighter forward, touching the open flame directly to the alcohol and soaked strips of curtain fabric. The cloth ignited instantly, a bright, aggressive line of fire racing down towards the neck of the glass bottle. The creature lunged forward, its jaws snapping violently in the air. I stepped directly into the charge, winding my arm back and threw the glass bottle directly into the center of the creature's matted chest. The thick glass shattered explosively upon impact. The alcohol coated the dry, brittle fur and the exposed yellowed stuffing protruding from the bursting sutures. The burning wick met the highly flammable liquid in a violent, concussive whoosh. The entire creature ignited like a massive candle. The dry hide, the ancient preservation chemicals, and the synthetic stuffing caught fire instantly, creating a towering, roaring inferno in the center of the study. The creature thrashed violently, its hoofs stomped chaotic rhythms against the burning rug. The massive antlers tore blindly into the drywall, ripping heavy chunks of plaster free as the fire rapidly consumed the stitched flesh. An inhuman, echoing screech filled the enclosed room. The sound was deafening, vibrating deep within my teeth and my skull. The vessel rapidly collapsed under the intense heat. The burning hide withered, the legs buckled, and the massive monstrosity crashed heavily to the floor, instantly reduced to a charred, smoking heap of blackened wire, melted glass, and gray ash. The oppressive atmosphere within the cabin vanished instantly, leaving only the choking smoke of a fire. We did not wait to investigate the ashes. My partner grabbed his fire extinguisher, aggressively dousing the burning rug to prevent the flames from spreading to the timber walls, and then we ran. We sprinted out of the study, navigated blindly through the dark living room, past the gored victim, and bursted through the splintered front doors into the freezing exterior. We sat leaning against the cold metal of our cruiser, grasping for clean air, waiting for the state police and the fire department to arrive. We meticulously coordinated our official statements. We wrote exhaustive reports detailing a severely chaotic scene, an unknown human intruder who led into the dense tree line, and an accidental fire caused by the homeowner knocking over candles during a violent struggle. We entirely omitted any mention of walking, stitched freak. The state detectives accepted the narrative without question, attributing to the brutal wine puncture wounds to a speculated exotic hunting weapon, wielded by the unknown assailant. The estate was heavily processed, and the massive collection of hunting trophies were eventually boxed up and scheduled to be auctioned off to private collectors to cover the deceased man's substantial debts. I'm posting this account here today as a desperate warning to the public. If you are an amateur collector, or if you frequently purchase estate sale hunting trophies, you need to understand the danger of bringing those items into your home. You do not know what kind of energetic tether the taxidermist bound to the hide, and you do not know what kind of spiritual vapor might be utilizing the glass eyes to watch you sleep. I know this because before the state detective cleared the scene, I utilized my authority as the responding officer to securely impound one small item from the house to serve as a baseline forensic sample of the homeowner's preservation materials. It was a small, perfectly preserved, stuffed red fox. I placed the evidence bag firmly on the left side of my desk at the precinct before my shift ended. I went down the hall to get a cup of coffee. When I returned to my desk 3 minutes later, the sealed evidence bag was sitting on the extreme opposite side of my desk, and the fox was facing the other way. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel. With that, I'll see you in the next video.